Let me start recording so that we can use it later. Uh, let's recap our yesterday's session because it was pretty important and it was pretty thorough too. And we covered our first knowledge area and it was around integration management. Can anybody of you help me to recap what we discussed yesterday? Any volunteer or should I request?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was all around the developing the project management plan,
Yep.
which is really pulling all the other components or other management plans together under integration management.
True.
In the first step, and I guess we covered most of the other management plans at a high level.
Yes.
And steps in those.
Mm-hmm.
And then just carrying out the work, directing and managing. We talked a bit about the capturing knowledge and sharing knowledge.
Yep.
As a new part, and then into how we manage and control, particularly around changes. We talked quite a bit about the change requests coming through and how they're managed and how they are distributed back into some of the other plans under the integration change control.
True.
And
Yep.
closing out.
And then we just talked about monitoring and controlling of the project work. That was about like ensuring that what activities we are doing, they should be as per our plan and should be aligned with our baselines. And at the end, we have seen our process for closing a project or a phase and what activities we can do as a project manager to successfully close a project. And today, we are going to discuss our next knowledge area. And this knowledge area is about project scope. Myra, what do you think? What is a project scope?
Scope is the agreement
Mm-hmm.
of the deliverables
Yeah.
that is expected to within the project.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, scope is like what we required to do on any project, and that scope is basically combination of different deliverables. Uh, Now, when we talk about scope management, there are few important things you should keep in mind, especially for the exam purposes, because like exam questions will be written in such a way that the concepts we are going to study in first 2 to 3 slides will help you to answer the questions right. Uh, the first point, Myra, can you please read for me?
Plan how you will determine, manage, and control scope.
So it's very important in scope management. The first thing is you should plan for your scope. When you say plan for your scope, mean how you are going to determine your scope. Obviously, by collecting the requirements, by gathering the requirements, by reviewing different documents, for example, a business case or agreements with the clients. And then once your scope is determined, how to manage it so that you can deliver all of the scope, but nothing else. So it's very important when we are doing scope management, we should have a very clear idea that what is included in a scope, what is not included in a scope. We will deliver as a project manager or a project team all of the scope, but only that scope, nothing else, no gold plating. And then control scope. When we are doing our work, our team is doing our work, it should be aligned with our scope baseline. Second point, Ayman.
Scope must be clearly defined and formally approved before work starts.
In fact, there is a process called define scope, and we are going to discuss that process in more detail today. Uh, Scope must be defined well. Uh, Scope statement should be prepared well. Work breakdown structure should be developed well. And once everything is done, our scope baseline is established. It should be formally approved before we start our work. And when we say formally approve, this process, who is going to approve the scope, would be written in our scope plan, that is subsidiary plan of project management plan. Sukanya,
Yes, sir.
yes, can you please read the next point?
Yeah. Requirements must be evaluated against the business case, ranked and prioritized to determine what is in and out of scope.
Yeah, so basically we need to discuss number 3 as well. That is requirements are elicited from all the stakeholders. This can take a substantial amount of time. Uh, who normally determines the requirements? Who gather the requirements, guys?
SMEs.
Basically, Myra, SMEs are in particular our BS. Okay, business analysts are the one who gather the requirements, especially our product requirements. Whereas PMs also gather the requirements, but they gather the requirements around project. And we all would be agree that uh, project and product both are different concepts. Their life cycles are different. Their requirements are different. And the life, in fact, what happens is like the life cycle of a product is normally bigger than a life cycle of a project. It starts from the conception till retirement of the product. If we will get time, we will see how a life cycle of a product look like. So BAs and project managers, they work together and gather the requirements. BA's focus is on product requirements whereas project manager's focus is on the project requirements. Normally product requirements are different than the project requirements. We are going to talk about both soon. But important thing to remember is we should do a very good plan, very appropriate plan as per the requirements of our project to gather the requirements, because it may take quite a lot of time to gather the requirements, to document them, to analyze them, and present them in a form where we can say that, okay, these requirements are useful to define the scope of our project. And number 4 point, as Sukanya just read for us, is that when we are gathering the requirements, we normally gather these requirements from our stakeholders using many different data gathering techniques or requirements gathering techniques. After that, what we do is we compare those requirements against the business case or against our agreements with the clients. And then based on that comparison, we rank and prioritize our requirements so that we can see that which requirements could be added in the scope of a project, or uh, they they would be out of the scope. In fact, there are many different prioritization techniques or prioritization schemes. Maybe you heard the name of few, but we will discuss some of them today. Another important concept for you to understand at the exam is a WBS is used on all the projects. As I discussed yesterday, work breakdown structure is one of the very important artifact on any project. If you are a project manager, uh, you must develop a WBS. If you are going to join an already going on project, in that case the first thing you should check is if WBS is developed or not. If WBS is not developed, then you should not continue the work, but quickly develop the work breakdown structure, obviously with the help of project team and subject matter experts, so that you can clearly see that what you are going to deliver in this project. The next point, Myra, can you please read for me?
You must make sure you're doing all the work, but only the work included in the project management plan.
So that's very important. That's we just discussed. It means that we should avoid two things. One is called scope creep. The other concept is called gold plating. Uh, in our scope, we really don't want any scope creep or gold plating. Now, my question is, what are these concepts? Anybody, any idea? And how they are different from each other? Yes, anyone?
So scope creep comes from um, changes happening during the project
Yeah, but
or extensions on the original
yes,
requirements.
yes, yes,
Um,
yes, Tanya. Yeah,
and
sorry.
the gold plating is likely to be added by like the project team or other people to give additional benefit to a stakeholder.
I fully agree, Tanya. So these are scope creep and gold plating. Scope creep talks about the changes to our scope, but remember, unwanted changes are the changes which are not formally approved. Okay, yeah, changes may come, but they should be formally approved, and they should be approved by following our change management process or change management plan. On the other side, gold plating is those extra functionalities or features that normally team uh, add in the project scope. Sometimes what happens is if they can finish their work early, they have time, they have budget available, they might think to add some gold plating or some extra functionalities into the project. It should not be the case. If your project is under budget within the schedule, then all the money should be returned to the project sponsor, and we should not do gold plating. Next, uh, Tanya, can you please read for me?
Any change to scope must be evaluated for its effect on time, cost, risk, quality, resources, and customer satisfaction.
So in fact, all these are constraints as we studied in our first chapter. So if there is any change in a scope, either mean it's a formal change that is approved, uh, or it is a scope creep. But important thing for us is we should always analyze our change. I will evaluate it and see its impact on all different constraints, because there are strong chances that a change uh, will or can delay our schedule, can increase our cost, maybe new risks are produced as a result of that change, and there should be more quality requirements, and we might need more resources or their time. Next, Grace.
Is it the first one? Sorry, that
Yes, yes,
no
Grace.
changes to scope are allowed without an approved change request.
Basically, this concept we are talking for a long time. Next,
You need to continuously determine what is and is not included in the project.
so that's always important, that you should have a very clear picture what is in scope, what is out of the scope. And then basically we do this work when we are controlling our scope. Controlling scope is one of the process of scope management. Then there comes our last point, Grace.
You are responsible for getting acceptance of deliverables throughout the project.
So as deliverables are being produced, you can go for its acceptance. As a project manager, it's your responsibility. You have to demonstrate your deliverables to the client or to the sponsor, totally depends what is your project, and ensure their acceptance. This acceptance could be done with a variety of different tools and techniques, totally depends on the nature of project. If project is a software project, maybe type of user acceptance tests or usability tests that could be used to accept a deliverable. Similarly, for example, if it's a construction project or a telco facilities projects or maybe even facilities management project, then walkthroughs and inspection of the facilities uh, could be used as a techniques for the acceptance of the deliverables. Now let's have a look on the 6 processes that are included in scope management. In fact, there are 4 processes into planning and there are 2 processes into monitoring and control. And you can see that there is no process of scope in executing process group. In fact, scope, schedule, and cost, they don't have any process in the executing group. The reason is when we develop our project management plan, we also include our scope, schedule, and cost baselines. And when we are doing our process of directing and managing project work, it's nothing but basically completing the scope by using the time and spending the money. So everything related to scope, schedule, and cost is included into our uh, integration management process called direct and manage project work. Now let's have a look on all different processes and see that what we do in these processes. But before discussing these processes, just one concept that is called product scope. In fact, what happens is what we do in a project, we develop a solution that could be a product, could be a service or a change. Here you can also say, instead of product scope, you can say solution scope. That is a wider terminology. We define solution scope or a product scope. Basically, these are those functions and features that we really want to see within our product. So product scope is nothing but all the functions and features we want to see in our product. And also sometimes product requires some non-functional components. For example, security, you know, that could be system security or hardware security or especially in networks and telco, security is very important component. Reliability, throughput, robustness, durability, all these are some NFRs or quality of service requirements. So these requirements are also part of our product requirements, and product is nothing but our uh, outcome of a project or desired end result. On the other side, when we talk about project scope, basically project scope include that work a project team does while delivering the product scope. And project scope include many different bits, many different requirements. For example, requirements related to schedule, requirements related to cost, requirements related to quality, requirements related to use of some particular processes. In fact, before that, requirements related to using a particular approach of project management. So sometimes organizations require that you have to do this project by using a waterfall approach or agile approach. Reason because we are following the agile method of doing. So now you are a contractor, we prefer you to also adopt this agile approach or a hybrid approach. On top of that, there could be other requirements related to use of resources, related to procurement, so on, so forth. Project managers focus is on the project requirements, whereas BA's focus is on the product requirements, because the role of BAs is to ensure that the product that is being produced as a result of project activities, it should be as per our project objectives and organizational objectives, and should fulfill the requirements of the business case. We already talked about these 6 processes. We already defined them, described them. We are going to discuss them in more depth in the coming slides, but quick overview is the first process is about scope planning. And when we say scope planning, it includes planning for both project scope and product scope. Planning also talk about how we will define the project scope or product scope, how we will gather the requirements before defining the project or product scope, what tools and techniques we will use, which stakeholders we will engage. And once our scope is defined, which method we will use to manage the scope. And normally we use work breakdown structure in waterfall and the development of product backlog in agile methods to manage our scope. Also, while we are planning for the scope, we also think about that, okay, once scope is well defined and we well represented it in the form of a product backlog or work breakdown structure. Now, how we will keep on controlling our scope throughout our project life cycle so that we should not deviate from our scope baseline. Similarly, we also talk about that what would be the process and who will be the people who will be involved in the validation of a scope. When we talk about validation of a scope, in waterfall, normally scope is validated at the end of the project. For example, when house is completed, then you bring the client and he or she take a walk through the house or inspect the house and either accept or reject what you developed or ask for minor changes what you did. On the other side, when we talk about agile approach, validation of the scope is very frequent, very quick. In fact, one of the ceremony of Scrum, if you remember, we talked about different meetings or different ceremonies in a Scrum process. Do you remember? Anybody? There were 5 meetings or 5 ceremonies that are taking place on each Scrum sprint.
I think the first one was around the backlog meeting.
Yes. So first one is basically around the backlog backlog is created in the start, and after that we just need to keep on refining the backlog. So first ceremony is where product owner with the team members or the developers keep on refining and grooming the backlog. And the next ceremony is
Is that the sprint planning phase?
yes, sprint planning, where we take the top items from the product backlog, top user stories from the product backlog that as a team, we think that we can complete in the next sprint of 1 to 4 weeks, for example. And then we do a very thorough, very detailed planning for each user story. Um, and this planning is done by the team, not by the project manager. And then there comes our next meeting or ceremony. Do you remember what is that?
The daily meeting.
Yes. Normally, Grace, we call them daily stand-up in Agile language, whereas in Scrum language, that is just one process, one method of Agile, we call it daily Scrum, where we meet for 15 minutes maximum, and we quickly discuss that what we did yesterday, what we are doing today, is there any obstacle or impediment that needs to be resolved. But we don't resolve that impediment during daily scrum meeting just to avoid wasting other people time. Okay. And after that, what we do, what is the next meeting or ceremony?
The review, sprint review.
Yes, product review. So product review is nothing but validation of the scope, where team present whatever they completed in 1 to 4 weeks of time to the product owner or to the client or the project sponsor as decided in the working agreement or in the team charter while in the initial stages. So product review is same like validating the scope. It is always the client or customer or the product owner who is nothing but voice of a customer. We call them voice of a customer, product owners. They have this authority to either accept, reject, or uh, ask for changes in the deliverables. And then there comes the last ceremony, and that ceremony is retrospectives, where team sits down and they look on product, people, and processes, how to improve them if there are any issues. So these are 6 processes of scope management. And the first process, as we already talked about, is uh, planning for the scope. Uh, Planning is our how component or our thought process. It helps us to decide that how we are going to define our project and product scope. How are we going to manage this scope? How we are going to gather the requirements? How we are going to decompose our whole project into small manageable work packages, so on and so forth. Uh, when we develop when we carry out this process called planned scope management, we get 2 outputs. One is scope management plan, and the other output is requirements management plan. We have already talked about both of the plans uh, in the previous sessions. Uh, Here there is some more information what is included in the scope management plan, but we already talked about it. So we are moving forward. Requirements management plan. What is requirements management plan? Here normally this plan is developed by business analysts in collaboration with the project managers. And requirements management plan, and or you can say its superset is business analysis plan. Here BS think about how to collect the requirements? Who will be the stakeholders? Uh, how stakeholders prefer to provide the requirements? Do they have requirements readily available, or we need to do something so that we can elicit the requirements from our stakeholders? For example, with the help of prototypes, uh, they can elicit more and more requirements from the stakeholders. With the help of wireframes or some other techniques, or proof of concept, or through the demos, they can gather or they can elicit the requirements from the stakeholders. And once requirements are gathered, what other activities we are going to do on the requirements, so that our requirements should be suitable requirements. They should be quality requirements. They should be verified. They should be validated. They should be well analyzed. Their acceptance criteria is well defined, so on, so forth. Uh, Not only we think about gathering requirements, we also talk about that once requirements are gathered, what prioritization techniques we are going to use uh, to include the requirements within the scope. And once those requirements are added in a scope and project work is going on, now the role of BAs, the business analyst, is to trace the requirements. When we talk about trace the requirements, one of the most famous technique on waterfall approach is traceability matrix, or in other words, we call it TM. Traceability matrix could be developed with the help of any sophisticated tool, or otherwise you can always use Microsoft Excel that help you to develop a traceability matrix they where all the requirements are present and they are traced back with business objectives. For example, business objective 1, requirement 2 with business objective 2. So here I am talking about backward traceability. Requirement 3 to business objective 2. Why we do this? Because we really don't want to add any requirement in our product or project scope which is not aligned with our business objective. That's the role of a BA on any project. If a requirement cannot be traced back to a business objective, normally we don't include that requirement, because that requirement would be uh, useless. And on the other side, we also conduct forward traceability. What forward traceability talks about, it says that each requirement should be completed. Mean there should be a deliverable, and there should be a quality assurance or testing activity related to that deliverable that will ensure that our requirement is going to be present in our uh, project end result or in our product. Everything is discussed in the business analysis plan or requirements management plan. Any question? Does I made some sense, or it was something totally irrelevant?
So good.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep, makes
thanks.
sense.
Okay, yeah, let's move further. And now let's start talking about collecting requirements. When we talk about collecting requirements, can anybody tell me that what are different types of product requirements we are discussing from last 1 to 2 sessions?
Sorry, Faiz, could you just repeat that question?
Yes, Tanya. My question was, can anybody comment that what are different type of requirements?
It could be a quality
Yes.
or service level agreement.
Yeah, service level agreement. That is our quality of service. Yes. So you guys, other guys can also add in if you have uh, anything in mind related to requirements.
Business processes, compliance.
Okay, I think let's open our whiteboard and discuss about the requirements. When we talk about the requirements, basically requirements could be divided into two types. One is our product requirements, other are our project requirements. BAs take care of product requirements, whereas project managers take care of project requirements. In fact, they work together. They work together in a collaborative fashion. In fact, there are a number of activities on any project where uh, the responsibilities are pretty overlapping between BAs and the PMs. So they need to work together. They shouldn't do redundant activities. But it's very important that we should understand the focus of a BA is on the product and the focus of a project manager is on the project. Now, when we talk about the requirements for a product, we can divide them into four main types. The first type is business requirements, such as business objectives, requirements related to use of current architecture, current infrastructure, current technology, so on and so forth. The second type of the requirements that are related with the product requirements are stakeholder requirements. And stakeholders normally have their own requirements that could be different than business requirements, and sometimes they could be even conflicting than the business requirements. And then there comes our third type, that is uh, product requirements. When we say product requirements, we are talking about two things. One is product features, or functions that we really want to see in our product. The second, as I mentioned today again, are our NFRs. NFRs are non-functional requirements, or sometimes we call them quality of service requirements, or sometimes we can call them SLAs, as Tanya just mentioned. And they talk about uh, depending on the nature of a product, talk about durability, speed, security, throughput, robustness, so on, so forth. And then there comes our fourth type. Yeah, fourth type of requirements. They are called transition requirements. Transition requirements comes when we are going to put our product or our solution produced as a result of a project into the operations or handing over to the client organization. And transition requirements could be of different types. For example, data conversion, data recording, or archiving, or training of the staff, prep of the training material, so on and so forth. On the other side, the project requirements are also of many different types, but they are mostly linked with the project constraints. For example, the requirements around costs, requirements around schedule, requirements around quality and compliance, uh, requirement around using a particular approach for project management or even project management processes that needs to be carried out on any given project. Sometimes what happens is like PMOs or organization, they adopt a particular framework, for example, PMI framework or maybe PRINCE2 framework, and they prefer that their contractors or the organization working with them, they follow particular project management framework and the associated uh, processes. Similarly, in quality requirements, for example, uh, different type of quality checks such as testing, uh, evaluation, inspection, uh, and walkthrough, so on and so forth, are different type of quality requirements that might come from the client or from different stakeholders. So these are two types of requirements in total. Now, next step is gathering these requirements. Requirements are gathered with the help of many different tools and techniques. Let's talk about few of them. Firstly, anybody of you involved in requirements gathering?
Just facilitating some stakeholders to gain their input, just like a group
Yes.
session.
Yeah, true. And basically those inputs are basically their requirements that we may or may not include in our project. What method you use to get that input?
It was a face-to-face facilitated.
Yeah. So were they interviews or they were like workshops?
It was a workshop.
Awesome. So facilitated workshops is one of the technique through which we can gather our requirements. Any other technique in your mind?
We did also use for that particular one production data.
Yeah. So can you explain a bit more about it?
Yep. So it was just current data on the product that was speed rates. It had around quality and sensory testing. It had quality failure rates, consumer complaint rates, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So it was all automated.
So there was data available and you use that data to gather some requirements, isn't it?
Just use like trends and
True.
percentages on it.
True. So normally we call them research or document analysis, where we gather data from already available documents by conducting the research around it. And then there comes our next data gathering technique that could be especially in case when we have only 1 to 2 stakeholders and they are very, very important stakeholders. And in that case, what we do is normally we conduct interviews from them. Anybody used interviews for the sake of data gathering? No, but yes, please.
Sorry if I said, yeah, no, our like our sales team would usually conduct a meeting, and that's when they'll do brainstorming, document analysis, and interviews in the form of discussion, I suppose.
True. I fully agree, Grace, what you said. Normally, sales team or BAs or even project managers for their projects, they conduct the workshops called facilitated workshops. Normally they are facilitated by a neutral facilitator who should be experienced as well and can conduct workshop in such a way that it should be productive, on time, and nobody should hijack that workshop. And during that workshops, many other data gathering techniques could be used, as you just mentioned. Uh, we are going to talk about those techniques soon. Sometimes what happens is, like, normally workshops are conducted for the stakeholders who are around like 10 to 20 in numbers, but in few cases, these people who want to gather the data, want to gather the requirements, and they meet the operational manager or the functional manager before the facilitated workshops and conduct interviews so that they can get more in-depth information from those subject matter experts. And when and based on that interviews, they are able to prepare for the workshops in a better way. When we conduct interviews, interviews could be highly structured or they could be semi-structured or could be fully unstructured. Anybody can tell me the difference between them?
I'm guessing highly structured just means that there's a specific set of like questions
Do you agree, Tanya?
that you would go through.
Yep.
Semi-structured would be with a guideline of questions and
Yes.
use some improvisation, and unstructured is more of an informal
True.
approach to gaining the information.
True. Where there are no set of questions, you just go and keep on asking the question and keep based on the answers you keep on making new and new questions. So interviews are normally done from SMEs or from those people who are a bit shy or vulnerable and they cannot speak in the workshops. Normally you conduct separate interviews with those guys. As a project manager, uh, you need to think about these lines too. You need to think on these lines too. What could be the other technique uh, to collect the requirements? Just brainstorm.
Observation.
Yeah, fantastic. Observations are one of the technique through which you can collect your requirements. And observations are normally, for example, there are workers working in the field. As a BA or project manager, you really want to see their work so that you can observe that what they are doing, what is the process through which they are going through. These observations could be passive observations. Passive mean that you just go sit down, let him do his work and note down that how he's doing, and you know the whole information about that activity or about that process. It could also be active observation. Active observation is bit different, and the difference is uh, you not only observe but also ask the question where you have some confusions or you want to elaborate further. Uh, Another type of observation is called job shadowing. And maybe you are aware of job shadowing, where basically instead of the worker doing the work, you do the work so that you can understand that what is this work. Normally, this type of technique is used in those projects where we talk about process improvements in the organizations or bringing change into the organizations by reducing the waste into the processes, so on, so forth. So observation is one of the strong data gathering technique or requirements gathering technique. What else?
Survey.
Yeah, surveys and questionnaires. And uh, when we use this type of data gathering technique,
When there's a lot of stakeholders to get feedback from.
yes, when the uh, size of the population is pretty big, number of stakeholders are too many, and you want to get feedback from a lot of stakeholders in a quick time. Surveys, they have their own advantages and disadvantages. Uh, Especially, it depends how you designed your surveys. Uh, are they qualitative surveys, or they are open-ended or close-ended surveys, and the information given by the people who completed the survey is of quality or not, because like most of the time you might experience this thing, people just keep on ticking, and they really don't read even the question. So size of the surveys are very important. So nowadays even a survey of 1 to 3 questions are preferred instead of a survey of like 30 minutes. Nobody can fill it, but in some projects still these type of surveys are used. For example, uh, the projects related to research, related to healthcare, so on, so forth. Any other data gathering technique? Think about a technique that is used in the workshops or in conjunction with the workshops. What we do in the workshops.
Do you mean like brainstorming? Is that what you-
Yes, yes, fully agreed. So in facilitated workshops, we can do some brainstorming to gather a lot of data. Now, when we talk about brainstorming, brainstorming could be done with the help of many different methods. And those methods could be round robin. Round robin is uh, at a time, one participant of the workshop speaks, and then next participant, then next participant, then next participants in a round robin fashion. But at a time, one person speaks. The other technique is called quiet writing. Quiet writing is where you give 5 minutes to the participants. They sit down, they brainstorm, write their ideas, and then uh, you as a facilitator take all the ideas and put them on the whiteboard. This is also a type of quiet writing. Another technique is just speak up. Speak up is like anybody can speak up, and as a facilitator, you keep on writing the ideas on the whiteboard. And by doing that, you can get a lot of different ideas in a limited amount of time. In fact, the data gathering techniques are used with data analysis techniques, data presentation techniques, so on, so forth. As we will get time, we will talk about those analysis and presentation techniques as well. At the moment, our focus is more towards data gathering techniques. Any other way of data gathering?
Conducting tests.
Yeah, conducting some tests, and from there we can gather our data. But now, what type of tests? Can you explain further?
I'm just thinking on like equipment testing. So maybe capacity or speed rates, or I don't know, just confirming those sort of what I guess that's more the current, and then looking at what the future can be.
Yeah, I think most of the time normally testing is done at the time of quality assurance, but up to some extent, I agreed we can get a lot of raw data from the testing as well. And here, when we are talking about data gathering techniques, we are thinking in terms of gathering the requirements or eliciting the requirements. Yeah, some other techniques that could be used, one of them that is coming in my mind is focus groups. Anybody use focus groups?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just around feedback on vision and values.
Yes. And normally the participants in the focus groups are pre-selected. They have like, yeah, selection criteria. Based on that, normally you bring those stakeholders. Sometimes they are your consumers or customers or the users who are going to use your product. And then you think about, I mean, you ask them about their feedback, about the vision, about the values, and also what they are expecting in the product, in the solution in the future. So focus groups are also one of the requirements gathering techniques. There are many other, for example, benchmarking is also a technique through you can gather some requirements. Sometimes you can do some secret shopping from your competitors to see what they have in their solutions so that you can determine the requirements for your system, so on, so forth. But important thing is there are variety of techniques. You choose those techniques as per your need, as per the nature of your project, and you gather a lot of different requirements. When requirements are gathered, after that, you conduct some analysis on the requirements. We will talk about requirements analysis or data analysis as soon as we will move further. Now I am going back to our slides. Anybody want to take a picture of this diagram? They can take. Okay, so these were our requirements gathering. Different inputs for this process are project charter, because high level requirements come from project charter, assumptions, the stakeholder assumptions about the product, about the project. In the assumption logs, now we need to convert those assumptions into well-defined requirements. Stakeholder register, this input is helpful to identify different stakeholders from where we can gather our requirements, from where we can elicit our requirements. Agreements, normally agreements contain a lot of different requirements into them, and we bring those requirements into our project so that we can analyze those requirements. If any change is required in those requirements as given in the agreements, changes could be made, so on, so forth. Organizational process assets, they can provide us with a lot of different processes, procedures, tools and techniques, and templates that we can use for requirements gathering. Similarly, when we do the document analysis documents are normally available within our organizational knowledge repositories that are also one type of OPAs or organizational process assets. Tools and techniques, we talked about brainstorming, we talked about interviews, we talked about focus groups, questions and surveys, we talked about benchmarking, where you basically benchmark your requirements with a standard in the industry or with that organization who is best in the industry, so that the requirements you are interested in that your solution should fulfill should be of high standard. And also, then there comes another technique called voting technique. Let's go back. Go back to our whiteboard. Once our requirements are gathered, after that, we do analysis with the help of different uh, analysis models. Those analysis models are of many different types. I'm just going to write few of them here so that you should be aware of them. Those analysis models are data analysis, system analysis, scope analysis, uh, interface analysis, business rules analysis. These are different type of analysis models, and the purpose of them is nothing but whatever requirements we gathered here, we have to make decision on it. We are BAs, we are project managers, we gather these requirements, we understand them well, but many other people on our team, our sponsors, our clients, our development team, they might not understand these requirements well until these requirements are presented with the help of many different analysis models. These analysis models are of many different types. In fact, I put 5 main categories here. Under each category, there are around 8 to 10 many different types available that you can use. I'm not going in depth of it, but the good thing is these analysis models help us to represent our requirements well. When once requirements are presented well, we also assure their quality. We also validate those requirements from our stakeholders so that they should be agreed that whatever we elicit from them, we presented them well. Also, once requirements are fully verified, fully validated, their acceptance criteria are defined, the next step is rank them, prioritize them. And ranking and prioritization is normally done with the help of decision-making techniques. Now let's talk about some decision-making techniques. What do you think, guys? What could be different decision-making techniques? Examples.
Yeah, I don't have a name for it, but I delivered a decision-making process,
Yes.
which goes all the way through, musts and wants and weighting of different ones, and then weighing up benefits and risks as well.
Oh,
So I don't know what you call it.
yeah. In fact, you might use the criteria while making a decision, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So this technique is called multi-criteria decision analysis technique, where for each of the requirement, for each of the option, you set a criteria, and based on that, you do some ranking, and then some voting, and then after that you determine the score for each option, each criteria, and the score with the highest options. With the highest, wrongly, sorry. The option with the highest score is chosen as the best option. So multi-criteria decision analysis is also decision-making technique. On top of that, there are many other techniques. For example, autocratic. Autocratic is where basically just boss decides that what would be the option selected, what would be the requirements that would be added in the scope. And also we have democratic techniques. Democratic techniques mean, for example, voting. Voting is one of the way through which we can make a decision about any requirement, any feature that needs to be added in our product or project scope. And when we say voting, voting could be done based on majority, and if not, if there is no majority, then based on plurality. And you know that what is plurality. For example, if there are total 10 people who are doing the votes, 4 people selected requirement 1, 3 people selected requirement 2, 3 people selected requirement 3. You can clearly see that there is no majority. In that case, you will go for a decision that will be based on plurality. So all these are different decision-making techniques. In fact, there are many other techniques as well, but we are not going to discuss them because that would be out of scope of our discussion. So voting was given here, so that's why we discuss this technique. Multi-criteria decision analysis, we already talked about it. Here we set a criteria for different requirements based on their importance, based on their ease of implementation, based on their dependencies with the other requirements, so on and so forth. And then people vote to each of the requirement, and the top requirements are selected for our project scope. Similarly, here is another example of tool and techniques is given called affinity diagram. Anybody used affinity diagram in their work? Affinity diagram is basically data representation technique. This technique is most of the time used with brainstorming. Once you brainstorm the ideas, brainstorm the requirements for your project, and you gather, for example, many different requirements. Okay, let me put those requirements here. Many different requirements. What you do is, after that, you group together similar requirements based on their affinity. The requirements who are linked with each other, they are grouped together, and normally a theme is formed. Okay, or we normally give them a title. Okay, these are functional requirements, these are non-functional requirements, these are related to transition, these are related to this stakeholder group, this is these type of requirements are linked with the business objectives, so on so forth. So affinity diagram help us to represent our raw data, and sometimes affinity diagram is also used to categorize the requirements based on their, for example, size. How big is that requirement? How much time and money it will take to complete it? Normally, we call this process a sizing process, where we get the requirements based on their sizes. Mind maps, many people use mind maps. They help us to further elaborate big size features, big size requirements, and we can know more detailed requirements with the help of uh, mind maps. They are a very good technique and is normally used by many teams on many different projects so that uh, more in-depth and detailed requirements could be gathered and they are grouped together as well. So more detailed requirements, but uh, they are grouped together based on their similarity. Nominal group technique, NGT. NGT basically talk about the ranking of the requirements. For example, uh, if you gather thousand of requirements or in a brainstorming session, sorry, you got like hundred of requirements, but when you use affinity diagramming or mind mapping for data presentation, maybe out of 100 requirements, there are few requirements, few ideas, which are like overlapping ideas, similar ideas. So you really don't put similar ideas separately. You just say that, okay, it's the same thing. So let's combine it or just use one idea and just wipe the redundant ideas. This is called nominal group technique or NGT. Observation, we already talked about observation, facilitation. Uh, we already talked about facilitated workshops. Context diagram. Uh, when I talked about different analysis models, one of the analysis model was scope models. And in scope, uh, one of the technique we use is called context diagram. What context diagram says, as I told you previously, that stakeholders, uh, they might not be able to provide you all the requirements, all the information that you need as a project manager or a business analyst. Then what you do, you sometimes develop context diagram. And this context diagram is about your product, about your system that you are going to develop. And in this context diagram, you also draw the other systems, other departments, totally depends on the nature of your project, other departments, other systems, or other products within the organization and their relationship with your product. This is called context diagram. Okay. And then there comes prototypes. Anybody of you use prototypes ever?
Not for me.
Not unless you call a new recipe for biscuits a
Yeah,
prototype.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that is just a prototypic recipe, and then you can develop many recipes, or you can go for in-depth analysis of that recipe, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. Or also when you are developing, for example, web-based solution, uh, sometimes initially you make a static website, few pages of that website, and show it to your customer so that your customer can tell you, okay, yeah, I really like this type of website. No, yeah, I overall like the website, but these components need to be improved, so on and so forth. So sometimes it really happens that uh, until you don't show a prototype to your customer, they may not be able to give them their requirements. Uh, and again, prototypes could be of many different types. Okay. Uh, They could be low fidelity prototypes, they could be high fidelity prototypes, they could be house models. Even in the defense industry, prototypes are made when they are planning for the war. So all these are different ways through which you can gather requirements from your clients. Uh, but when you go to the stakeholders, they may ask a lot of things in the project that you really cannot include. What you have to always consider is called your project objectives. The requirements should be traced back to your project or business objectives. Resolving competing requirements. Everybody wants their requirements to be fulfilled by the system, by the product you are developing. So in that case, the way to resolve the competing requirements issue is always go back to business case and state that, okay, these are the reasons for which project is started, and your requirement is not uh, basically aligned with our business case objective. Similarly, project charter, project scope statement, or project constraints are different things through which you can basically talk with stakeholders in an open and transparent manner, so that they should have a very clear understanding that if their requirements are going to be fulfilled by the project or the product, or maybe some of them are going to be fulfilled by the project outcomes, or none of their requirement is going to be accepted in this project, in this release of a product version. Maybe their requirements will be fulfilled in the upcoming release, so on, so forth. However, sometimes conflict become like goes to next level. Your scope management plan and your project management plan should always have that escalation path. If conflict is not going to be resolved, then how to escalate it to senior management. Once you complete this process of gathering requirements, the next step is uh, you have to document that requirements, and you have to develop a requirement traceability matrix. We already talked about it. Then there comes our next process called define scope. Uh, Once your requirements are prioritized and you know that, okay, out of 1,000 requirements, we are going to complete 200 requirements in this project. Next step is defining the project scope. Let me explain you defining the scope with the help of our whiteboard. I'm erasing the whole thing. Okay, how to erase it? Maybe like this. Yeah, it's working pretty good. Okay. Now, when we define a scope, basically we define a scope with the help of our scope statement. Scope statement is a document that is produced as a result of this process, and it includes both project and product scope. This project and product scope was described on a very high level in our project charter, or maybe even in the business case. However, in the scope statement, the scope is written in a detailed manner. It clearly tells what is in scope, what is out of scope. It may also mention some assumptions and constraints, but again, at a detailed level. It also talk about the deliverables. The specific deliverables may be in bullets or in numbers. Okay, these are 5 deliverables that will be produced as a result of this project. Not only deliverables, but also their acceptance criteria. Mean how we will say that, okay, this deliverable is as per the requirement. It would be with the help of our acceptance criteria. Normally, a few pages document, scope statement, but it is very, very important document. It should be developed by the project manager with the help of project team by gathering the requirements from the stakeholders and conducting some prioritization techniques, applying some prioritization techniques, doing some data analysis techniques, so on, so forth. Any question about scope statement? Can we move further?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So defined scope is a process whose outcome is, whose output is scope statement. When we are defining our scope, we are defining both product and project scope. And sometimes we also conduct some product analysis. When we conduct the product analysis, it is basically talked about that, okay, this is a product that we are going to develop, but by looking on our constraints related to resources, expertise, money, schedule, what if we have any options uh, through which we can develop the same product but with reduced price, with less time, and by using the current expertise of our product team. This is called alternative analysis. Sometimes we also do this type of analysis as well. Do the same thing, but by spending some reduced money, because we have this constraint of money, we have constraint of time, we have constraint of resources, we cannot hire more contractors. So why not find a way to develop the same product, but using our or within our constraints or limitations. Project scope statement, we just talked about it. We talked about that project scope statement contain product scope, project scope, deliverable, acceptance criteria, what is out of scope, some assumption and constraints. Then there comes our process number 4. This is called creating work breakdown structure. Once our scope is well defined and approved by the senior management or by the client, the next step is now how to manage this scope. We know that this is a project. These are the deliverables we want to produce. This will be our product. This will be our project activities, but we just know it with the help of our scope statement. But what can we do is we can decompose our main project in a structured form, in a hierarchical form, so that should be more visual instead of just written statements, and where we can have a very clear idea that, okay, this is our project that is decomposed into small components. We call them work packages, and those components are more manageable. Well, let's go back to our whiteboard and try to develop a work breakdown structure. Work breakdown structure is an important artifact as we discussed. In work breakdown structure, what we do is we decompose our project. We write the name of the project here, project name, okay. On the top level, this is called level 1. Okay, call it level 1. And then from there, uh, we divide the project into different phases. Each project life cycle is different. It means the phases under each project could be different. Normally phases are put on level 2. You can think of this is phase 1, and then this is phase 2. This is phase 2. This is and then go up to phase N. So in work breakdown structure, the first step is project name at level 1. On level 2, we have our phases. And then the work under each phase is further decomposed or broken down. And we do it with the help of different work packages. So on level 3, we divide each phase work into different work packages. Call them, for example, work package 1 uh, or work package 2. Let me write work package 2. Let me put it here. And write like this. So this is work package 2 under phase 1. Normally this level is called level 3. So this is our level 3. Similarly, for each phase, we divide the work into the work packages. Work packages are more manageable. They are visual. The whole work breakdown structure is a hierarchical structure. Okay. And for small to medium sized project, we develop our work breakdown structure up to level 3. However, for bigger projects, especially manufacturing, construction, or big IT projects, normally we go for level 4 and if required down to level 5. Normally a big project, a large project could be decomposed down to level 5. Let me draw it for you so that you can see what does it mean. So this is, you can say, level 4, where basically work package 1 is further divided. I'm sorry, there are too many different ones. Work package 1 is further divided into 2 more packages, and the first one is work package 1.1. And the other one is work package 1.2. So this is level 4. Okay. Work package 1.1 could be further divided into, for example, uh, level 5 packages. And you can say that 3 packages. And here they are. Let's give them name 1.111. Okay. And then 112, and then 113. So what we did is we divide the project into the phases, then each phase is divided into work packages. Then as a expert, as a project manager, we should know that, okay, level down to level 3, if work packages are decomposed enough that we can fully manage them properly or not. If we feel that no, they need to be further decomposed, then we can keep on decomposing further. Work package 1 is further decomposed to level 4, work package 1.1, work package 1.2. Okay, and then work package 1.1 is further decomposed at level 5. But question comes in mind, how long we should keep on decomposing them? Basically, that's our understanding, and that's our experience that tell us that how much we can decompose our project. Normal rule is 8 to 80. What this rule says, that we can decompose our packages from 8 to 80 hours of work. 8 hours mean 1 day, and uh, 80 hours are basically our 2 weeks if we consider working days. So once you can decompose your work down to those work packages which are 8 to 80 hours, it's fantastic. But the most important thing is you should decompose your whole project fully. This is called 100% rule or 100% decomposition. Remember, guys, as we believe on rolling wave planning or progressive elaboration, it may happen if our phases are pretty big, then we may decompose only phase 1 into detail and maybe phase 2 up to level 3, and phase 3 up to level 3. But for example, phase N down to level 3, but we just leave a placeholder there instead of further decomposing it, because we don't have enough information to decompose. That we always can do it. It means that work breakdown structure development is also an iterative process. We can always go back and keep on improving our work breakdown structure. What advantage it gives? The advantage it gives is if we decompose our project in such a way that at the end we get a list of work packages. It's not compulsory that all the work packages are at level 5. Few of them could be at level 5, and other could be at level 4, and few of them could be even at level 3. We get those work packages that we believe that we can manage it. Even sometimes we keep on decomposing our work packages down to that level where we can assign it to a person or a group of team members, okay, and they work on it. Normally, work packages are not interlinked with each other. What I wanna say here is they are interlinked, no doubt, but in our work breakdown structure, we normally don't show any particular relationship between the work packages. Why? Because we wanna keep our work breakdown structure simple and effective. We wanna see our individual work packages. If we complete those work packages, our project is completed. That's the purpose. The other purpose is we want to decompose our project in a visual way so that we can avoid scope creep. If our project is written in the term, in a form of a list or in a form of just a lengthy scope statement, no work breakdown structure, then there could be the chances that scope creep could be added. However, if it is in a visual form and there are individual work packages that needs to be completed, then scope creep could be avoided. But on work breakdown structure, work packages are written in a simpler form. However, with each work package, excuse me, with each work package, normally we have an associated dictionary called WBS dictionary. This WBS dictionary talk about many different bits about those work packages. For example, resources assigned, uh, some attributes, uh, dependencies between other work packages, but these things are only available in the work breakdown WBS dictionary, not on WBS itself. And again, the purpose is we want a simplified visual hierarchical structure for our project. Also, sometimes we have control packages. What are control packages? Sorry, let me tell them their exact name. Control accounts. What are control accounts? Control accounts are where basically we can control the expenditure of our money. Just think about construction of a house where we did the foundation, we did the interior, we did the electrical work, mechanical work, exterior, and landscaping. In landscaping, for example, we did lawns separately, barbecue machines separately, but the woodwork that include the decking, the shades, and the fences, each of them are, you can say, one work package by one work package. For example, this bit is, where is it? Just give me a second. Yeah, here. This bit is, for example, decking and decks in our landscape. This one is our fence, and this one is our shade. Okay, they are different work packages, but for the purpose of money management or budget management, what can we do? We can put all of these three into one control account. It helps us to keep an eye on our cost baseline. This is the purpose of control accounts. What happens is normally one work package is part of only one control account. However, one control account may have multiple work packages under it. Another important concept related to work packages are the numbering. Normally we call the level 1 items at 1, level 2 items, that is, for example, phase 1. We call them 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, so on and so forth. Work package 1 under phase 1, we call them 1.1.1. Work package 2, 1.2. Work package 1.1, we call it 1.1.1.1. Work package 1.2, so on and so forth. This is called numbering based on the levels on which our work packages are available. Guys, questions?
No, it's good for me. Thanks.
None from me.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Pedro. Pedro. Now, we have a short time. Otherwise, we would go for an activity where everybody should develop a work breakdown structure. But I hope you got the idea. In fact, PMI published a standard, a practice guide on work breakdown structure. It's that important. It's a 50 pages guide. You can go and get that work breakdown structure guide, practice guide, and after going through it, getting expertise into it, you can start making the work in the WBS for your project in a more effective way. Before moving further, just last concept, that is scope baseline. Scope baseline is nothing but combination of three things. One is scope statement, other is WBS, and the last one is WBS dictionary. These combine together to make the scope baseline against which we measure the performance of our team. Now let's go back to our slides. Whatever I discussed is given in these slides. We in fact cover all of these bits. We discussed WBS dictionary, its purpose, and scope baseline that include WBS dictionary and scope statement, as I just mentioned. Okay, so there was an activity, but we have to skip because it's almost 15 to 11. We are just moving further. Once our scope baseline is set, our rest of the planning is done. We start executing our project work. We start producing our deliverables. We start completing our work packages. The next task is, once work packages are completed, they should be accepted by the customer or client. Now, it's very important that when you submit your work to the customer, to the client, it should be quality assured, quality controlled. We should be confident the work we are submitting to our client should be of quality. Okay, so validate scope is a process that is in direct control of customer. They are the one who can accept the deliverables. They can also reject, or they can also uh, ask for the changes in those deliverables. In this slide, uh, a process flow is shown to you that tells that how this work is moved. When we do this process called direct and manage project work, what is the output? Anybody remember? Our
Deliverables.
deliverables. Then these deliverables that our project team produced should go for inspection for quality control. Okay, if they pass the quality control, we can say confidently that these these deliverables are verified deliverables. Okay, and quality control process is done on them. Sometimes it can pass quality control, sometimes it doesn't pass. If it doesn't pass, then we have to go for change requests. Mean we check the doors of this house, but the sizes of the doors are different. Now, before showing it to the client, let's make them of same size. Then we have to go for a change request that can evaluate it through integrated change control. If that change is accepted, mean for example, sponsor said, yes, he is very important client of us. We must give same size doors to this client. Mean changes are approved. Then you have to go back to direct and manage work again. Mean you have to do that work. You have to adjust the size of the doors. And again, it will go through quality control. And if this time, if it passes quality control checks, the next step is we need to meet the customer so that we can validate our scope. Now, mean deliverable is completed, please check it. Now again, customer may accept, reject, or request for the changes. If there is a change request, it should go through the same flow as we just discussed. But if customer is happy with the solution, with the deliverables, then customer accepts the deliverables. This is called in agile, especially until customer doesn't accept a feature, doesn't accept a deliverable, we really don't say that our work is done. Production of the deliverable is not important. Quality control is not enough. We only say our features are completed or the work is done once customer accepts it. Any question about it? Then there comes another process, control scope. Control scope is under monitoring and controlling. Here, this process is normally executed. These activities are normally executed by the project managers or the project team. And the purpose is that whatever work we are doing, uh, it should be aligned with the scope baseline. And for that sake, we always keep on looking on our data that is produced as a result of direct and managed project work, and we keep on comparing that data with the scope baselines. If deliverable one needs to be produced, is it produced or not? If deliverable one need to be completed in 2 weeks, how much it is completed, so on, so forth. By doing this, we always manage our baseline, and we normally do this work in a proactive fashion. Now, these were different processes we just discussed. Now, before ending our session, let's go through our key concepts and see that did we really understand what we discussed today. First, let's start with Tanya. Tanya, can you please go through this slide?
Key concepts are project scope versus product scope.
So do you understand what's the difference between two?
Yep, one is the requirements that are needed out of the project.
Yep.
So, and then the product scope are what's required, or the requirements of the product.
Yes. And yeah, fully agree. And then there comes our next step. Next bullet point.
Scope definition over project life cycle continuum, predictive to agile.
So what it is saying is, normally in predictive life cycle or in waterfall method, we define scope very well in the start. And once scope is approved, we really don't want any change. In fact, we take those actions through which we can prevent change on our scope. This is predictive. That's what we discussed today. On the other side, the agile mindset is we really don't go for in-depth scope definition, and we are always ready to accept changes in our project scope. So that's the difference of scope definition. A detailed scope in predictive, and over the period of over the period of time, scope is defined in agile project management. Next.
Scope change in predictive and adaptive environments.
Yeah, in predictive, it should go through integrated change control. Integrated change control, and in adaptive, anytime, no problem. However, one thing you should know that once iteration is going on, especially in Scrum, okay, once iteration is going on, team doesn't want to change in the iteration, doesn't want to change in the scope of the iteration. They say that after 2 weeks, no problem, whatever you will give us, we will develop. But whatever we already selected and you prioritized, now let us work on it. However, in some other techniques, such as extreme programming, that is XP, similar to Scrum method, uh, they even accept the change within the iteration, within the sprint. So they are more open to the changes. Next.
Role of stakeholders in scope management in predictive and adaptive environments.
Here in predictive environment, normally stakeholders related to the scope management, scope validation is normally at the end of the phase or at the end of the project. However, in agile environment, stakeholders or business people or the clients or their voice, they work together with the development team. And scope management, scope validation is very frequent, very proactive. In fact, the product owner keep on managing the scope with the help of product backlog and keep on validating the scope at the end of each iteration. Then last,
Scope verification and validation of a project and product.
so verification is more around quality control, and validation is more about acceptance of the project and product deliverables. Trends and emerging practices. Grace. Pedro.
Trends and emerging practices, business analysis for competitive advantage by defining, managing, and controlling requirements activities.
Yeah. So as I already told you, from previous decade, business analysts become the key part of our projects because we want our projects to achieve our organizational objectives or business objectives. Then there comes our next point.
Business analyst versus project manager.
Yeah, it's very important that BAs and PMs, they have some overlapping responsibilities, and they should be very careful about this area. They need to work in a collaborative manner, and they shouldn't do redundant work. Project managers focus is on project, BS focus is on the product. Tailoring considerations, Myra.
Knowledge and requirements management.
So based on the needs of a project, you can assign the time for knowledge management and requirements management. It is very, very important that we have clearly see that requirements gathering could be a tedious process, a lengthy process, can take a lot of resources, a lot of time and money. So we should do this business analysis work, this requirements gathering work as per the need of our project. We shouldn't spend a lot of time on it, but we should gather enough requirements so that our scope should be well defined. Then there comes validation and control, scope validation and scope control. This process should be run as per the requirements of the project as we defined in our scope plan. Okay, where we talked about how scope will be validated and what activities we will do to control the scope, which methods we will use to control the scope. Similarly, most of our tailoring considerations are based on the development approach. In Agile or hybrid, we do things differently than waterfall. And then there comes stability of requirements. If requirements are stable, not ever-changing requirements, it's very good for the project. Unstable requirements can cause a lot of change requests in the project. Similarly, governance is one component that we must consider while tailor our 6 scope management related processes. Any question? And then there comes our last slide of today, that is consideration for agile and adaptive environment. Though throughout we discuss these considerations, but let's go through it. And if Grace is here, can you please go through it?
Considerations for agile
Yes.
adaptive environments. In projects with evolving requirements, high risk or, can you hear me okay? Oh, sorry. In projects with evolving requirements, high risk or significant uncertainty, the scope evolves during the project.
Yes, in fact, that's what we are talking about. Agile is for those projects. The requirements are very uncertain, and the project is very risky, and uncertainties around technologies, around requirements are quite a lot. So, in that case, normally we use agile way of working, where scope keep on evolving over the iterations, over the sprints, or over the period of time. Uh, Ayman, can you go through next bullet point?
EGL methods will please send less time to define and agree on scope in the early stage.
Why? Because scope is ever evolving. If we will spend a lot of time on defining the scope, then if there will be change in the scope, we will not like it. If we don't really spend time on defining the scope and just start working on it, you know, we just require two things: the time, the money. Okay, time is there 6 months, for example, fixed time. Okay, yeah. Schedule is, for example, 6 months, and cost is around, for example, okay, budget is around, for example, 1 million. We just need this, and we need not to worry about our third component of iron triangle. Here it is given in the inverted form. Can you see? It is given in the inverted form. Here, uh, we don't worry about the scope. Scope can be changed. In waterfall, our iron triangle is in this form, where scope is always fixed, and then time and budget could be changed, though we really don't want, but they could be changed. But in the agile, time and the budget is fixed. However, scope is ever evolving. Next is a gap between real and stated requirements. This concept is talking about that sometimes stakeholders really don't know that what are their real requirements, and agile teams use variety of techniques together or to elicit real requirements. And for that sake, they use prototypes, okay, and they release versions so that they can get more and more information. In fact, after each 2 weeks, they get more and more requirements from the customers. The purpose of product demo or product review, that meeting number 4 in Scrum, is not only to show what you did. The other purpose is to gather requirements from your client or customers. And once you gather those requirements, you refine your product backlog. Basically, the refinement process is ongoing process. And this was end of the session. Any questions? Please feel free to ask.
No, that all makes sense to me. Thank you.
You're most welcome.